The clicking sound of her heels stopped abruptly, plunging the opulent kitchen into a silence so thick it felt weighted with unseen threats. For 5 years, Eleanor had endured that sound, the rhythmic, condescending clack-clack-clack of her daughter-in-law's approach, announcing a new demand, a fresh humiliation. But today, the cessation of that noise was the first sign that the gilded cage was cracking. Eleanor looked into Serafina's shocked, pale face, repeating the simple, devastating sentence that had been forming in her soul for months. "I won't be here." The real shock wasn't the words themselves, but the cold, quiet certainty in Eleanor's voice. What Serafina didn't know was that this refusal wasn't just a sudden rebellion. It was the final, meticulously calculated move in a game she hadn't even realized she was playing, a game that was about to cost her everything she thought she had won. "My name is Eleanor. I am 66 years old, and for the last 5 years my home, a sanctuary I had built over 3 decades, had become my personal prison. I had been relegated to the role of a domestic servant, a shadow who existed only to fulfill the whims of my daughter-in-law, Serafina. It had all started subtly, like a slow-growing vine choking a healthy tree, right after my son, Darren, married that woman. From their very first week in the house, Serafina had decided I was her personal, unpaid employee. "Eleanor, get me some coffee. Eleanor, clean this spill. Eleanor, cook dinner for my guests and me." And like a fool, blinded by the desperate need to keep my family together, I always obeyed. I cooked, I cleaned, I maintained a flawless home while they took the credit, enjoyed my resources, and lived as if my time, my energy, and my dignity were worthless commodities. That Tuesday in early December marked my absolute limit. Serafina swept into the kitchen, wearing a ridiculously expensive crimson dress, undoubtedly paid for with Darren's money, without knocking, of course. Her fake smile, the one I despised, was pasted firmly across her face. "Eleanor," she began, using that saccharine, condescending tone she reserved exclusively for me. "I have marvelous news. My entire family is coming to spend the holidays here. It's only 25 people. Only 25 people. As if I were a machine designed purely for endless cooking and scrubbing." I saw the triumphant malice glittering in her eyes. She settled into my favorite kitchen chair, crossing her legs, and began to reel off the list of guests as if reading a tedious grocery order. "I've already secured Viviana, my sister, my cousin Isadora, my brother-in-law Silas, my revered Uncle Dominique. Everyone is coming. It's going to be a perfect Christmas." She paused dramatically, waiting for my expected reaction of panic and subservience. "Of course you'll handle everything," she continued, her voice light and careless. "The food, the cleaning, serving the tables." Her words landed like physical slaps. I remembered the endless times I had prepared complex meals for her friends while she claimed the praise. The times I had cleaned up after her lavish parties while she slept until noon, making me invisible in my own house. "We'll need at least 3 whole turkeys," she declared, completely ignoring my silence. "And that special chocolate silk pie you make too. Oh, and you'll have to decorate the entire house. I want it picture perfect for the Instagram photos." She waited for the standard, compliant, "Yes, Serafina." But this time everything was different. Something inside me had finally and irreparably shattered. I looked her directly in the eye, maintaining a stillness that surprised even myself. "Perfect," I repeated, watching her smug smile instantly falter. "It will be a perfect Christmas for you all because I won't be here." The silence that followed was heavy, complete, and glorious. Serafina blinked several times, genuinely confused. Her mouth gaped slightly, unable to form words. The clicking of her expensive heels had stopped, forgotten. What do you mean you won't be here?" she finally stammered, her voice trembling slightly. "Exactly what you heard," I replied. "I am going on vacation. You all can cook, clean, and serve yourselves. I am not your employee." The color drained completely from her face. Her hands, resting on the coffee cup, began to shake. For the first time in 5 years, Serafina was truly speechless. But Eleanor," she finally managed. "I already told everyone to come. It's all planned." You can't do this. Of course I can, I stated, the 4 words landing in the kitchen like a bomb exploding. It's my house. Serafina's jaw dropped, her shock rapidly turning into towering indignation. She shot up from the chair, her heels clicking again, but this time with raw desperation. This is ridiculous. Darren is not going to allow this. Darren can have whatever opinion he likes, I responded, utterly serene. But the decision has been made. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I was the one in absolute control. What she failed to grasp, what neither of them knew, was that this decision was far from spontaneous. It had been painstakingly planned and executed over the last several months, born from a discovery that would soon leave their manipulative world speechless. Serafina's expression quickly morphed into fury. Her cheeks flushed scarlet, and her eyes narrowed like a snake about to strike. She took a step toward me, invading my personal space in her usual attempt to intimidate. You know what, Eleanor? I always knew you were selfish, but this is the absolute limit. Her voice turned venomous. My family is traveling from afar, some from out of the country, and you're going to ruin their Christmas over a whim. A whim. 5 years of calculated mistreatment, humiliation, and deep emotional abuse, and she dared to call it a whim. I felt a cold rage stirring in my chest, but I maintained my outward serenity. I had long ago mastered the art of controlling my emotions to survive her reign of terror. That is not my problem, I replied, my calmness unnerving her further. You should have consulted me before inviting 25 people to my house. Our house, she shrieked, finally losing all composure. Darren is your son. This house will be ours one day. There it was. The ugly truth that had always hovered unspoken in the air. Serafina didn't see me as family. She saw me as a temporary, elderly obstacle blocking her inevitable inheritance of everything I had built through years of sheer hard work and sacrifice. An interesting perspective, I murmured, watching her pupils dilate with panic as she realized the extent of her revelation. Very interesting indeed. Just then we heard keys rattling in the front door. Darren was home. Serafina bolted toward him, running like a frantic child tattling on a sibling, her heels clattering with desperate urgency. Darren, your mother has gone insane. She says she won't help with Christmas. She says she's going on vacation and leaving us alone with my entire family. I heard their muffled voices in the living room. Serafina's voice was sharp and dramatic. Darren's responses were indistinct. After a few agonizing minutes, their footsteps approached the kitchen. My son appeared in the doorway, his work suit wrinkled, his face exhausted but already registering profound annoyance. Serafina followed him closely, arms crossed, wearing a look of expected triumph. She clearly anticipated him putting me back in my place. Mom, Darren began, using that condescending, patronizing tone he had adopted since their wedding. Serafina told me about your decision. Don't you think you're being a little dramatic? Dramatic. My own son was calling me dramatic because I refused to be his wife's personal servant. A cold, hard certainty settled in my stomach, solidifying the resolve that had been growing for months. No, Darren, I corrected him. I am not being dramatic. I am being clear. But Mom, it's the holidays. It's a time for family. Serafina already invited everyone. We can't possibly cancel now, he pleaded. I didn't suggest canceling, I countered. I simply said I won't be here. Serafina immediately stepped forward, positioning herself between us like a human shield. See what I mean? She has become completely irrational. What is my family going to think? What am I supposed to tell them? Tell them the truth, I answered calmly. Tell them that you assumed I would be your unpaid employee without consulting me, and you were mistaken. Darren sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. His usual gesture when frustrated. Mom, be reasonable. You know Serafina can't possibly cook for 25 people by herself. And why not? Challenged. I've cooked for her massive parties for years. It's time she learned how. But I work. Serafina protested, outraged. I can't take days off just to cook. My career is important. Her career. A part-time boutique position, likely secured through Darren's connections. Yet, her career was always somehow more important than my own time, energy, and fundamental dignity. Then hire a caterer, I suggested with an insincere, sweet smile. There are many excellent options available. Catering costs a fortune, Darren exclaimed, his voice rising in panic. Why should we spend thousands of dollars when you can? He stopped abruptly, realizing the truth he was about to expose. When I can do it for free, I finished for him. Like always. Like the employee you think I am. The silence that followed stretched tautly between us, like a widening fissure. Serafina and Darren nervously exchanged glances. I could see the frantic gears turning in their minds, desperate to find a new angle to manipulate me into submission. Look, Mom, Darren finally said, adopting a softer, more cajoling tone. I know you've been a bit sensitive lately. Maybe you're going through some hormonal changes. Hormonal changes. Seriously. He was reducing 5 years of justified grievances to the cliché of a hysterical, menopausal woman. The deep fury I had carefully contained began to boil, but I managed to keep my voice steady, ice cold. There is nothing hormonal about this, Darren. This is about one very clear thing, respect. And for 5 years, neither you nor your wife has shown me any. That is untrue, Serafina protested, clutching at straws. We have always treated you well. You are part of the family. Yes, I agreed, a dangerous edge in my voice. The part of the family that serves, cleans, and cooks while you two enjoy yourselves. The part of the family that is never consulted but is always expected to obey. Darren stepped closer, attempting to place a placating hand on my shoulder, an old manipulative habit from his childhood. But he was no longer the sweet child I had raised. He was a grown man who had consistently chosen his wife's comfort over his mother's well-being. All right, Mom, I understand you're upset, he tried again. But think about it. Just 1 week. After the holidays, everything goes back to normal. Normal. They're normal. Where I was invisible except when needed. Where my feelings were irrelevant as long as their lives remained comfortable. Where my house had become their personal, unpaid hotel. No, Darren, I said, shaking my head. Things are not going back to normal, because I am leaving tomorrow. They both froze. Serafina was the first to react, her voice rising an octave in true panic. Tomorrow. You can't. Tomorrow, I confirmed, truly relishing the terror that began to gleam in their eyes. I already have everything arranged. This is insane. Serafina shrieked, pacing my kitchen like a newly caged animal. You can't leave tomorrow. It's impossible. My family arrives in 3 days. Well, I replied, calmly washing my coffee cup, the calculated movement underscoring my imperviousness to her drama. You should have considered that before you took for granted that I would be your employee. Darren shifted nervously, clearly torn between supporting his now hysterical wife and trying to reason with the woman who held the key to their holiday success. Mom, please, he eventually murmured. At least tell us where you're going. When will you be back? I'm going to visit my sister in Sarasota, I lied smoothly. And I'll be back after New Year's. The lie came easily. They couldn't know my real plans yet. After New Year's. Serafina practically choked on the words. But what are we going to do? My uncle Dominique already purchased his plane tickets. Viviana cancelled important plans. Silas took time off work. Those, I stated flatly, are their problems, not mine. I watched desperation begin to eclipse the rage on Serafina's face. Her perfectly manicured hands trembled as she gripped the marble countertop, her knuckles white with pressure. Eleanor, her voice suddenly changed, becoming syrupy and manipulative. You know I've always thought of you as a second mother. You are so important to me, to us. You can't just abandon us like this. There it was. The predictable switch in tactics, from fury to pathetic emotional manipulation. I had seen this play many times, but its power over me was entirely gone. If you truly considered me a mother, I countered, you wouldn't treat me like a servant. But I don't treat you like a servant, she insisted, her voice wavering. I just thought you enjoyed cooking for the family. I thought you liked to feel useful. Useful. That word was a dagger. For 5 years I had clung to the belief that being useful was my pathway to peace, my way of securing a place in my son's life. Now I understood that being useful had only made me a shadow in my own home. You're right, Serafina, I admitted. I do like to feel useful. That's why I'm going to be useful to myself for the first time in years. Darren intervened again, his growing frustration visible in every line of his tired face. Mom, this isn't fair. You know we don't have the money to hire a caterer for 25 people. The deposit on the new apartment wiped out our savings. A new apartment. This was the first I was hearing of it. My eyes narrowed, a dangerous curiosity overriding my anger. What new apartment? I demanded. Serafina and Darren exchanged a quick, guilty glance, the look of conspirators who had accidentally revealed a secret. Well, Darren started, looking down at his expensive shoes. We were going to tell you after the holidays. We found an incredible place downtown. 3 bedrooms, ocean view, a gym in the building. Sounds expensive, I commented, keeping my tone neutral as my mind raced, connecting the dots. Yes, but it's worth the investment. And don't worry, we're not moving far, only 30 minutes from here, he assured me. 30 minutes. Close enough to keep using my house as their private restaurant and laundering station, but far enough to maintain their exclusive privacy. How perfectly convenient for them. And how exactly do you plan to pay for this? I asked, though I had a strong suspicion. Serafina's face suddenly brightened, believing she had found the perfect way to appeal to my sense of duty. That's precisely why it is so important that we have a perfect Christmas. My Uncle Dominique is extremely generous when he's impressed, and my brother-in-law Silas has strong connections in real estate. If everything goes well, they could help us significantly with Darren's business venture. There it was, the whole sordid truth. The grand Christmas celebration was not about family. It was about money, about performing a perfect image to impress wealthy relatives and extract financial favors. And I, the unpaid maid, was the central cornerstone of their entire manipulation scheme. I see, I murmured, allowing the silence to stretch as they waited for my confirmation. So, you need your Christmas to be perfect, to impress the rich family members. Exactly, Serafina exclaimed, clearly relieved I had finally understood the gravity of her situation. I knew you'd get it, Eleanor. You're so smart. You always know the right thing to do. The right thing. For 5 years, the right thing had been to sacrifice my well-being to enable their gilded lives. Now I possessed a profoundly different perspective on what was right. You are absolutely correct, Serafina, I said. I know exactly what the right thing to do is. That's why my decision stands. I am leaving tomorrow. The last remnants of hope vanished from their faces like water spilled on hot asphalt. Serafina began breathing rapidly, hovering on the verge of a full-blown panic attack. You can't ruin our future over a tantrum, she cried. It's not a tantrum. It is a well-thought-out decision, I corrected her. But what will my family think when they arrive and find no one here to receive them? When they see there is no food prepared? They will think that their niece invited them without possessing the capacity to be a proper host, I replied. And they will be correct. Darren stepped closer, his desperation now palpable. Mom, please. If you really need a vacation, we can postpone it until after New Year's. We'll pay for your trip, the hotel, everything. They would pay for my trip. With what money, I wondered, given they had just claimed the apartment deposit had drained their savings. But their offer was 5 years too late. The offer is tempting, Darren, I said, my voice gentle but firm. But my decision is final. This is emotional blackmail. Serafina burst out, her mask of sweetness finally dissolving completely. You're using our situation to manipulate us. Emotional blackmail. The words hung in the air, an unwitting confession of their own 5 years of behavior. Do you know what emotional blackmail is, Serafina? I asked, my voice rising slightly. It's making me feel guilty every time I don't want to cook for your friends. It's telling me that a good mother-in-law always puts the family first when I refuse to clean up after your parties. It's assuming my plans don't matter because I'm retired and have nothing better to do. Every word was a precisely aimed bullet. I saw them both flinch with each accusation because deep down, they knew that every syllable was true. That's not the same thing, Serafina stammered, her voice losing its previous force. You are right, I agreed. It is not the same. Because what you two have done is much worse. You have taken my generosity for granted for years. The kitchen fell into a strained silence. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock and the mechanical hum of the refrigerator. But loudest of all was the sound of my own approaching freedom. Tomorrow, everything would irrevocably change, and they had absolutely no comprehension of the seismic shift I had engineered. That night, while Serafina and Darren were still arguing in desperate, hushed whispers in the living room, I locked myself in my room and pulled out my laptop. It was time to initiate the second most delicious phase of my plan. This plan had been meticulously brewing for months, ever since I had discovered the folder that changed my entire perspective on my dear daughter-in-law. 3 months earlier, while foolishly tidying Darren's home office, I had found a forgotten folder tucked among his papers. It was filled with bank statements, printed emails, and legal documentation. At first, I assumed they were work-related, but then I noticed Serafina's name appearing repeatedly in transactions I couldn't comprehend. Later that night, I had returned to the office and meticulously reviewed everything. What I uncovered chilled me to the bone. Serafina had been spending money they simply did not possess. Credit cards opened in Darren's name without his knowledge, personal loans taken out using the house as collateral, and compulsive shopping sprees at elite luxury stores that amounted to more than $50,000 in personal debt. But the treachery didn't stop there. I also found emails where Serafina discussed with her friends how to manage Darren to prevent him from discovering her spending, and most horrifyingly, a message thread where she plotted to convince him to sell my house. The house I had lived in for 30 years, paid for with my savings and sacrifice, to pay off her staggering compulsive shopping debts. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake until dawn, processing the shock, the betrayal, and the sheer audacity of the deceit. But amidst the devastation, a cold, calculated determination began to grow, the fierce need to protect myself and my home. The next day, I began my own silent investigation. I hired a private detective, a discreet man recommended by my lawyer years ago. I tasked him with tracking all of Serafina's financial activities. What we discovered was even worse than I had initially feared. Not only was she a compulsive gambler of money, but she had also been lying extensively about her job. Her important career at the boutique was barely minimum wage and part-time, yet she convinced Darren she earned triple that amount. The extra money for her extravagant personal expenses came, of course, from the secret credit cards and loans. Furthermore, she had been systematically deceiving her own relatives, telling them that we were far wealthier than reality, that Darren had a thriving business, that I possessed a considerable fortune, and that our house was worth double its actual market price. All these were brazen lies designed solely to maintain her facade as a successful, well-married woman. Now, staring at my laptop screen in the quiet darkness of my room, I smiled for the first time in months, because I had already taken countermeasures they couldn't possibly imagine. First, I had moved all my substantial savings to a new account at a different bank, ensuring Darren would never have access to them. Then, I consulted with my lawyer about protecting the house deed, discovering legal avenues to ensure no one could force its sale. But my true masterstroke was the direct contact I had made with Serafina's most influential family members. Her uncle Dominique, the successful businessman from Sarasota, her brother-in-law Silas, the real estate agent she planned to use, and her sister Viviana, who worked in finance and had an impeccable reputation. I sent them polite, measured emails, introducing myself as Serafina's concerned mother-in-law, requesting advice on helping the young couple through a delicate financial situation. Casually, I accidentally attached some of the most damning bank statements I had found. The responses were immediate and ferocious. Dominique was livid at being lied to about Serafina's actual status. Silas immediately cancelled any possibility of financial assistance based on false information. Viviana was so infuriated that she threatened to fly in personally to sort out her younger sister's life. The best part: none of them had told Serafina yet. They were waiting for the Christmas gathering to confront her in person. A gathering that would now be missing the host, the food, and the festive, opulent atmosphere Serafina had promised through her lies. My phone vibrated. It was a text from Dominique. "Mrs. Eleanor, after reviewing the documents you sent, my family and I have decided to arrive a day earlier than planned. We want to speak with Serafina about some important matters before the celebration. Would it be possible for you to receive us on the morning of the 23rd? The morning of the 23rd. The exact morning I would be packing my bags. What exquisite timing." I replied instantly. "Of course, Dominique. It will be a pleasure to have you. However, I must inform you that I will be leaving for a trip that same day, so Serafina and Darren will be your hosts." His response came back in seconds. "Perfect. That will be exactly what we need." I closed the laptop and lay back in bed, smiling in the darkness. For 5 years I had been the submissive victim, the free employee. But all that time I had been observing, learning, and understanding the inner workings of my in-laws' manipulation. Serafina believed she was so clever, but she had fatally underestimated the older woman who quietly cleaned up her messes. Tomorrow morning, while she was still deeply asleep, I would be packing my bags. Not for Sarasota as I had lied to them, but for the Azure Shore Resort, a luxury hotel suite with an ocean view just an hour away. From there, I would secure a front-row seat to the collapse of the shabby little kingdom of lies Serafina had so carelessly constructed. I would watch her family discover her systematic deceptions. I would watch Darren finally open his eyes to the woman he had married. And I wouldn't have to lift a single finger to make it happen. Serafina had dug her own grave. I had merely handed the shovel to her furious, wealthy relatives. Outside, the strained argument in the living room finally ceased. I heard footsteps on the stairs, doors closing, followed by the tense silence of a house fraught with unresolved conflict. But I slept deeply that night for the first time in 5 years. At 6 o'clock in the morning, my alarm clock sounded like a triumphant anthem of freedom. I rose with an energy I hadn't felt in years. I showered peacefully and began packing my bags. Every garment I folded was a step toward independence. Every stored item was a silent declaration that I was no longer anyone's employee. Serafina and Darren were still asleep, their deep breathing audible from the hallway as I carefully carried my suitcases downstairs. I prepared a note, leaving it on the kitchen table beside the spare house keys. "Have decided to leave early for my trip. The house is in your hands. Enjoy your perfect Christmas. Eleanor." What the note omitted were my additional preparations. I had completely emptied the pantry and the refrigerator. If they intended to host 25 people, they needed to learn the responsibility of acquiring food. I had also locked away all my finest china, my elegant tablecloths, and all my Christmas decorations in my bedroom. If they truly wanted to impress the rich family, they would have to acquire their own supplies. My final satisfying touch was the cancellation of the cleaning service that visited twice a week, a service I paid for, but for which Serafina always claimed the credit for having a perfectly kept house. Starting today, she would finally experience what maintaining a household truly required. The taxi arrived promptly at 7 a.m. As the driver loaded my luggage, I took one last lingering look at the house. It had been my sanctuary, then my prison, and now it would soon be fully reclaimed as my fortress. I checked into the Azure Shore Resort. The suite was everything I had yearned for during my years of forced servitude. A spacious suite with an ocean view, 24-hour room service, And most importantly, absolute profound silence. No one shouting demands, no one expecting fresh coffee, no one assuming my time held no value. My phone started ringing at 10:47 a.m. Darren, of course. "Mom, where are you? We found your note, but why did you leave so early?" His voice sounded confused, still thick with sleep. He had likely just discovered the vast emptiness of the pantry, and the fact that no one was there to make his usual weekend breakfast. "Good morning, Darren," I said, deciding there was no reason to draw out the inevitable. "You two have much preparation to do, and I am very much looking forward to some rest." "But Mom, this is so sudden. Serafina is..." "Well, she's pretty upset," he stammered. "Upset." A diplomatic understatement for a full-blown panic attack, no doubt, sparked by the dawning realization that she actually had to take charge of her own life. "I am certain she will manage perfectly," I assured him. "After all, she's a very capable woman." I heard voices in the background, Serafina speaking rapidly and hysterically. "Could you at least tell us where you are, in case of an emergency?" Darren pleaded. "I am safe and in a good place." "That is all you need to know," I responded. "Mom, please. I know you're angry, but this is extreme. Serafina's family arrives in 2 days, and we don't know how." "Darren," I interrupted firmly. "You are 32 years old. Serafina is 29. You are both fully functional adults. I am confident you can solve your own problems without relying on a 66-year-old woman." There was a long pause. "Fine," he finally sighed. "But promise me you'll be okay. And when are you coming back?" "I'll be back when I'm ready. Enjoy your Christmas." I hung up before he could insist further and immediately silenced my phone. I ordered lobster thermidor from room service, savoring a dish I would never have allowed myself to cook at home, where Serafina's austerity standards prevailed. The best part of the plan was scheduled for the next morning. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I finally checked my messages. There were 17 missed calls from Darren, 31 from Serafina, and an avalanche of texts escalating from confusion to outright outrage. But the message I truly anticipated had arrived from Dominique at noon. "Mrs. Eleanor, my family and I will arrive tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning as agreed. We look forward to meeting you personally and having that important conversation with Serafina. Thank you for your hospitality." Hospitality. If only he knew that by 8 a.m. the next day, the only hospitality he would find would be Serafina frantically trying to explain why the house was barren, why there was no food, and why the generous matriarch she had boasted about had vanished. I replied to Dominique, "I regret that I had to move up my trip due to unexpected family commitments. Serafina and Darren will be delighted to host you. I'm sure you will have much to discuss." His response was immediate. "I understand perfectly. In fact, this might be for the best. Some conversations are better held in private." Private. Exactly what they needed. A private family intervention between a compulsive liar and the relatives who finally knew the truth about her financial deceptions. The morning of the 23rd dawned clear, and my phone exploded again. I ignored the calls while leisurely eating eggs Benedict with smoked salmon on my suite's terrace. I checked the voicemails. The first was from Darren, his voice trembling. "Mom, please pick up. Serafina is hysterical. We don't know what to make for 25 people. The grocery store doesn't open until 8, and the family arrives exactly at that time. We need help, urgently." The second, from Serafina, was completely broken. "Eleanor, I know you're mad, but please don't make me look bad. They traveled so far. I don't know how to cook for this many people. I promise we'll fix everything, but right now I desperately need your help." The third message was even better. Serafina, now sobbing uncontrollably. "Eleanor, I just checked the pantry and the refrigerator. Everything is empty. Why is there nothing? How am I supposed to feed my family? Where is the good china? Where are the Christmas tablecloths? Please just tell me where you put everything." The dawning, painful realization that running a household requires planning, effort, and actual monetary expenditure. The critical message arrived at 7:15 a.m., from a voice I didn't recognize, speaking with cool authority. "Mrs. Eleanor, this is Dominique, Serafina's uncle. We arrived at the airport early and decided to come straight to your house. We expect to be there in 15 minutes. I'm very much looking forward to having that conversation we've been planning." Perfect. They would arrive at the precise peak of Serafina and Darren's panic. At 8:20 a.m. my phone rang again. Answered. "Mom." Darren's voice was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. "Good morning, Darren. How is your morning going?" "Mom, please don't do this. Serafina's family just arrived, and we have absolutely nothing to offer them. Serafina is crying in the bathroom, and I don't know what to do. Have you explained the situation to them?" "What situation?" Challenged. "How do you explain that my mother decided to go on vacation right when we needed her most? When they needed me most. Not when I needed respect, understanding, or a simple thank you for 5 years of free service. Tell them the truth, Darren," I commanded. "Tell them that for 5 years you took it for granted that I would be your unpaid domestic servant, and that I finally decided I deserved a vacation." I heard confused voices in the background. Someone, Dominique clearly, was sternly demanding to know the location of the main hostess. "At least can you tell us where you always bought the food? What you used to make for special occasions? Anything to help?" Darren pleaded. "Darren, I didn't simply buy anything. I planned for weeks in advance. I researched recipes, made detailed lists, compared prices, and dedicated entire days to preparation. It wasn't magic, Darren. It was work. A lot of work." The silence told me he was finally starting to grasp the magnitude of what he had so willingly ignored. "Look," he continued, his voice defeated. "I know we've been inconsiderate, but right now I need practical solutions. What do I do with 25 hungry people in my living room? Order takeout. Call restaurants. Go to the supermarket. Do what all responsible adults do when they have guests," I instructed. "But it's the holidays. Everything is closed or swamped. The restaurants have no availability." "Then maybe you should have thought of that before you invited 25 people without consulting the person you expected to do all the work," I retorted. A serious voice cut through the background chaos. "Dominique. Mom, Serafina's uncle wants to talk to you. He says he needs to understand what is going on." "I would love to talk to him, but I am on vacation. Tell him Serafina can explain everything perfectly. After all, she is the one who organized this gathering," I stated. "Please, Mom, just 5 minutes. He is very confused and a little upset. I think he can help us solve this." Help us. Again, it was only about helping them. Never about what I needed or deserved. "Darren, listen to me very carefully," I said, my voice hardening. "For 5 years, every time you needed something, I was there. Every time Serafina wanted to impress someone, I did the work. Today, for the first time in half a decade, you have to solve your own problems. And that is simply not my responsibility." "But it's my family," he finally shouted, losing control. I hung up, turning the phone off completely. It was time for the next phase. I went down to the hotel's business center and opened my email. I had several new messages from Serafina's family. The first was from Viviana, the financially responsible sister. "Dear Eleanor, we've just arrived at your house and the situation is truly confusing. Serafina claims you left due to an emergency, but we don't understand why the house seems uninhabited. There is no food, no Christmas preparations, and frankly, Serafina's attitude is extremely strange. Could we speak by phone?" The second was from Dominique, his tone now considerably more serious. "Mrs. Eleanor, I respect that you had to travel, but I need to understand what is happening here. Serafina cannot coherently explain why the food she promised is not here, why there are no decorations, or even why she did not know you would be gone. This does not align at all with the family picture she painted for us. Please contact me urgently." Perfect. This was the exact opening I had planned for. I replied to both with a carefully constructed message. "Dear Dominique and Viviana, I deeply apologize for the confusion. I was forced to move up my trip due to circumstances I would rather not discuss over email. However, I believe it is important for you to understand Serafina and Darren's true situation before continuing with any Christmas plans. The documents I previously sent you reflect only part of the financial reality. If you truly wish to help Serafina, I suggest you have a very frank conversation with her about her spending habits and her unrealistic expectations regarding family support. Sincerely, Eleanor. I didn't have to wait long. 20 minutes later, the hotel phone rang. It was the front desk. "Ma'am, you have a long-distance call. A Mr. Dominique says it's urgent. Put him through, please." Dominique's voice was tense but controlled. "Mrs. Eleanor, thank you for taking my call. I need to ask you some direct questions about my niece." "Of course, Dominique. I'm all ears. First, is it true that Serafina has been asking you to cook and clean for all her family gatherings?" "That is correct. For the last 5 years, every time you have visited or she has entertained guests, I have handled all the preparations." "And when she told us about the elaborate dinners and perfect events, was she organizing them, or were you?" "I planned everything from scratch." Serafina took the credit. There was a long pause, filled with muffled background argument. "Second question," he continued, his voice turning icy. "The financial statements you sent us, are they real?" "Completely real. I obtained them directly from my son's personal files." "And Serafina knows you discovered her debts?" "Until today, she had absolutely no idea that I knew about her secret spending or her lies about her income." "I see," he said, his voice heavy. "One more question. Why did you decide to leave at this exact moment?" "Because I grew tired of being treated like a domestic servant in my own house," I replied simply. Serafina assumed I would cook for 25 people without even asking if I was available or willing. The long, tense silence returned. Finally, Dominique spoke, his voice dripping with contained anger and deep disappointment. "Mrs. Eleanor, my family owes you a profound apology. Serafina has been lying to us for years. She painted a picture of your family as prosperous, where she was the perfect organizer. She asked us for financial help to expand Darren's business when, apparently, that money was destined to pay off her personal, compulsive shopping debts." "I'm afraid so," I confirmed. "And we, like fools, were ready to help, because we believed she had proven herself to be responsible and successful. When, in reality, you have been the one keeping everything running while she took the credit. Well, now we know. And let me assure you, my family does not tolerate this kind of deceit. Dominique, if I may suggest something. Please. I think it would be beneficial for Serafina to face the natural consequences of her decisions. She has lived in a bubble of privilege where others solved her problems. Perhaps it is time for her to learn to be truly independent." "I completely agree," he affirmed. "In fact, I have some news for her that is going to change her perspective drastically. The supposed financial support she was expecting from the family for her husband's business was entirely dependent on her demonstrating fiscal responsibility and transparency. After seeing these documents and the current situation, I can guarantee there will be no support." My smile widened. "I understand. But there's more. My brother-in-law, Silas, who was going to help them with real estate connections, is also very upset. Apparently, Serafina had gone so far as to ask him to evaluate some properties for investment, including the house where you live." "No, I did not know she asked Silas to evaluate my house for a sale," I stated, the fresh betrayal stinging. "Well, Silas is furious. He invested time and resources based on false information and feels completely deceived. Which brings me to my main point. My family has decided that this perfect Christmas is going to become a family intervention." Family intervention. This was far better than I had dared to plan. Serafina would not only face the logistical nightmare of her party, but would also have to account for years of deceit before her entire furious family. "And what about the other relatives?" "Yes. They are all aware of the situation now. For dinner tonight, the whole family will know the full truth about Serafina." "And does she know?" "Not yet. But she's about to be informed," Dominique replied. I heard voices rising sharply in the background. Mrs. Eleanor, I have to go deal with this situation, but I want you to know that my family respects you enormously for enduring this for so long and for having the dignity to walk away. Thank you, Dominique. That means a great deal to me. One more thing. When you are ready to return, we hope to meet the real Eleanor, not the employee Serafina pretended you were. It will be a pleasure. That evening, I hired a discreet car service to drive past my neighborhood just to observe the scene from a safe distance. What I found surpassed my wildest expectations. Several rental cars were parked haphazardly, and multiple grocery bags were scattered on the front porch, clearly abandoned mid-crisis. My phone vibrated. A text from Viviana. Mrs. Eleanor, could you call me? I need to ask about additional documents. Called immediately. Mrs. Eleanor, Viviana said, her voice tight with professional concern. I'm reviewing my sister's financial situation, and it is far worse than we thought. I just discovered she has been using Darren's name and credit information to open accounts he knows nothing about. This could easily be considered identity fraud. Does Darren know about this particular element? Yes. We just told him an hour ago. He is in shock. He keeps repeating that it must be a misunderstanding, Viviana reported. Viviana, I must ask something delicate. Did you know Serafina told your family that I was considering making her the beneficiary of my will? The question hit her like a lightning bolt. What? Yes, she told us you were planning to leave her the house and a significant portion of your savings. She used that story as collateral for some of the loans she took out from our cousins in the States. The betrayal was bottomless. $20,000 in debt that I was supposedly going to cover with my death, I whispered. Viviana, I can assure you that is completely false. My will does not include Serafina as a beneficiary of anything. I imagined so, but she used that malicious lie to borrow over $20,000. How is Serafina reacting to all this? Yes. She's in complete denial, Viviana sighed bitterly. She insists it's all a misunderstanding and that you are simply being vengeful, because you felt left out of the Christmas plans. Even when confronted with irrefutable evidence, Serafina clung to the victim role. And the Christmas celebration. Viviana laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. What Christmas? Serafina ordered pizza for 25 people because she didn't know how to cook anything else. We are eating off paper towels because she can't find the good plates. Instead of celebrating, we are having the most intense family showdown of our lives. Pizza for 25. The irony was exquisite. What do you plan to do now? I inquired. Some of us are leaving tomorrow. This isn't a family reunion. It's a financial cleanup. But a few of us are staying to ensure she understands the consequences of her actions. All family loans are being called in immediately. The financial support for Darren's business is gone. And we will be informing other family members to protect them from future manipulations. Poetic justice was being served hot and fast. And Darren. That's the saddest part. I truly think he knew nothing about her deeper lies. He is devastated, Viviana confirmed. But I also knew this was the only way he would ever open his eyes. Viviana, there is one more thing you should know, I shared. When I return home, and I will return soon, I will be making some significant changes. Serafina will no longer have free access to my house. There will be new rules, new boundaries, and new consequences for disrespect. That sounds perfect. It's time she learned to live in the real world. I hung up and asked the driver to take me back to the Azure Shore Resort. Tomorrow, Christmas Eve, would be my triumphant return. The morning of December 24th dawned cold but bright. I packed my bags calmly, preparing for the final confrontation. Before leaving the hotel, I called my lawyer, Richard. Richard, it's Eleanor. Are all the documents we discussed ready? Perfectly ready, Eleanor. The changes to the will are notarized. The amendment to the house deed is registered, and the new residency agreements are ready for your signature. Perfect. I'll see you in an hour at my house. Are you certain you want to do this on Christmas Eve? Richard inquired. Richard, there is no more perfect time, I said. It's time my family learned the true meaning of gratitude. The taxi dropped me off at 10 a.m. I opened the front door with my key, and the entire house fell into a stunned silence. Eleanor! Darren's voice was incredulous, bordering on hopeful. Yes, I'm back, I announced. Darren appeared first, with deep dark circles under his eyes. Behind him came Serafina, a version I had never seen. No makeup, wrinkled clothes, eyes swollen raw from constant crying. Then came the rest of her relatives. Dominique, stern and imposing. Viviana, clutching a folder of documents. Silas and Isadora, their faces etched with disappointment. Mrs. Eleanor, Dominique said, extending a hand with newfound respect. It is an honor to finally meet you. We are deeply sorry to have met under these atrocious circumstances. The honor is mine, Dominique, I replied. And don't worry. Sometimes the truth needs to come out dramatically. Just then the doorbell chimed. It was Richard, my attorney. Richard, thank you for coming, I greeted him. I believe we are all ready for the conversation we've been postponing for years. Richard entered, his professional presence immediately adding legal weight to the room. Good morning, he stated. I am Richard Miller, Mrs. Eleanor's attorney. I understand there are some family and financial matters that require clarification. Serafina grew even paler. Why is there a lawyer here? She whimpered. Because after 5 years of emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and a total lack of respect, I have decided I need legal protection, I replied with chilling calm. Legal protection from what? Darren asked, genuinely confused. From your wife's attempts to use my future death as collateral for loans, I recited. From her plans to convince you to sell my house to pay off her compulsive shopping debts. From her unauthorized use of your credit information. Need I continue? The silence was absolute. Serafina slumped onto the sofa, finally accepting that her carefully constructed world had totally collapsed. Richard, I instructed. Shall we proceed? Very well. First, the testament changes, Richard stated, opening his briefcase. Mrs. Eleanor has amended her will to ensure that the ownership of this house can never be sold or mortgaged without her explicit consent. Even after her death, the house will be transferred into a family trust that protects Darren's interests but prohibits any form of financial speculation. Serafina began to weep silently. Darren looked deeply shocked but, for the first time, genuinely ashamed. Second, Richard continued, the new terms of residency. Serafina no longer has unrestricted access rights to this property. Any visit must be coordinated in advance and approved by Mrs. Eleanor. What does that mean exactly? Darren asked, his voice shaking. It means your wife can no longer walk into my house whenever she pleases, give orders about my food and my time, or assume I will be her domestic servant, I clarified. Mom, I never knew that she... You never knew. I challenged him gently. In 5 years, you never noticed that every time you had guests, I did all the work while she took the credit. You never wondered why your wife never cooked or cleaned but always boasted about what a perfect hostess she was. Darren bowed his head, finally confronting years of willful blindness. Dominique approached Serafina, his voice heavy with paternal disappointment. Serafina, our family gave you opportunities, trust, and support based on falsehoods. You made us unwitting accomplices in your disrespect toward a woman who deserved our admiration, not our contempt. Uncle, I never wanted. Serafina tried to protest. You never wanted what? Dominique challenged. To lie about your income. To commit identity fraud. To promise inheritances that weren't yours to give. To treat your mother-in-law like a servant. Serafina had no answer left. There is one more thing, I continued, looking directly at her. You will pay back every penny you borrowed using lies about my supposed inheritance. You will personally apologize to every family member you deceived. And you will learn to live within your actual means, not in the fantasy you built at my expense. And if she doesn't? Viviana asked the financial expert. Then she will face the appropriate legal consequences for identity fraud and fraudulent obtainment of credit, Richard finished, closing his briefcase with a sharp click. I addressed the entire family gathered in my living room. For 5 years, I sacrificed my dignity because I thought I was keeping the family together, I concluded. But I learned something important. A family built on disrespect and manipulation is not a family at all. It is a toxic structure that hurts everyone involved. I looked specifically at Darren. Son, I love you, but you have to decide what kind of man you want to be. One who allows his wife to abuse his mother, or one who defends respect and honesty in his family. Finally, I looked at Serafina. And you have to decide if you want to be a responsible adult who faces the consequences of her actions, or continue to be a manipulative child who expects others to solve the problems she creates. The clock struck noon on Christmas Eve. Now, I said with the slow, radiant smile I had been saving for months. Those who wish to stay for a Christmas based on honesty, respect, and real gratitude are welcome. Those who prefer to continue living in fantasies and manipulations may leave. For the first time in 5 years, I was in total control of my house, my life, and my future. And I had never felt a freedom so absolute.